Split to 3 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If anybody has a phone with them, please turn it to silent. And let's recite the Pledge of the Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And take the roll. We've got our attorney, Tony Pyers, with us.
Piers today.
Huh?
Piers today.
Piers?
Pyers sometimes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
My brain's a little fuzzy.
It's okay. I've been called a lot worse.
Supervisor Tinkle, Supervisor
Thanks.
Banks, Supervisor Feinberg, Supervisor Guy, Supervisor Flaherty, our district manager, Chris Shoemaker. I'm sorry, she's stressed. I am. I'm not doing good today. And our financial manager. Business manager. April White. April White. Okay. I did the roll call. I'll do better next time. Sorry. Do we have anybody that wants to speak?
Yes, we have two. The first will be Rod Senior from Bent Pine Drive. Welcome back, Mr. Senior.
Nice to be back.
Hi.
Hi. Rod Senior, Bent Pine Drive, Gateway Greens for the record. Bill, you and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but there's one thing I think we do agree on, is prudent control of what is our scarce resource, which is capital, and avoiding an unacceptable burden on the Gateway residents. I've heard you say this in a few meetings, and I agree with you. I want to talk about the lakes for a couple of minutes, if that's okay. Over 3 years, I've witnessed Tetra Tech's position. A Tetra Tech here? Okay. I've seen Tetra Tech's position shift astonishingly in the amount of capital that's needed on these lakes. We started, you'll all remember, the first sticker shock was $700,000 a year for 5 years. I've still got the PowerPoint slide on Danny Nelson's presentation. Based upon Morris Ryler's reports, I did a surgical evaluation together with Danny Nelson by lake, which we fact-checked together, published in the board book for April 15, put it in the Gateway Sun to give the residents an idea of what we're trying to do here for $4 million. So we're already up from 3.5. Danny supported that publication. I initiated, with your board, Bill, a 20-year SRF loan with the intention of spreading the burden of the residents who are going to enjoy this lake bank restoration over a 20-year period. And that amounted to something like $50 per house on the trip, on the non-ad valorem property taxes, which I think everyone at the time thought was reasonable. And the Tetra Tech soft cost for doing this facilities plan for the SRF loan was going to be around $60,000, and I'm not really sure whether that's changed an awful lot. That's the kind of figure that stuck with me. The first $4 million appears now to have grown to $6 million, and remember that $4 million at the time, going back to April 15, was for all the lakes, tiered from 1 to 7. Okay, and I've still got the schedule. But now for $6 million, I don't think we're even getting 10. It's a handful of lakes, and I'm not sure of the number, somewhere probably between 5 and 10. So the Gateway residents now, in addition to the $6 million, are being asked to fund a further $14 million to take it to 20. Ed, you and I, we've worked so hard on this over the years, and our roles were reversed. Where I was sitting there, you were standing here, and I stuck with this $4-5 million number, and you urged the board to go for a higher number because we've got one facilities plan to do, one load of soft costs. Why not go for a big number? I know that's your position. I never agreed with you on this, and I still don't. If you speak to Chris here, he'll tell you, if you allow him to lead, that is, that we're moving too fast. We're leaving too much money on the table. we had one lake, 116, which happens to be where I am. We had one bid. And unless I'm mistaken, the reason why there was no other bid is because we were trying to race against time. We were trying to get this thing done in the rainy season. And I get that. And I think the district is right in all of its. I know you're trying to do the right thing, we're trying to stay compliant, but do we really need to race to the extent that we'd only have one bid and we spend $1.15 million without even another bid? I pose that question. There is certainly no pressure from South Florida Water Management. If Brian Rose or Melissa Roberts were standing here, they'd tell you that they're not about to issue us with a handful of notices of violation. I talked to them yesterday. So the pressure's coming from within the district, and you're being proactive, and there's nothing wrong with being proactive. I vouch for that too. But so it's not like we have to get this done, otherwise we're going to receive an enormous fine this year. We're not. That's what I'm told by the South Florida people, and I believe them. I think the other thing I want to point out is that lake bank restoration technology, the way I've started to learn about it, which is a ton of stuff in the last 2 years, I knew nothing, is that it's emerging technology. You know, what we're doing at the moment is still work in progress. We're spending $200 a linear foot. I mean, we're buying this Armamax from Propex. That was originally quoted at $90 a linear foot when I was involved in it. We're at $200 a foot. We're putting a quarry load of stone on top of it for some reason, because you're supposed to have by Armamax because it allows turf to grow through it. Now we're throwing all this stone on there, and I get, if it seems like we've got this dilemma. We've either go littorals or we go stone.
Mr. Senior, you're about out of time.
Okay, would you allow me another 1 minute,
Yes.
please? So there's a lot of stuff we're learning, and I think we have to go down that learning curve before we go and apply for a huge amount of money like 20 million. I'm in favour of stopping at 6 and looking at reviewing what this thing looks like in 2 years' time and how did we do before we go and get ourselves trapped into a facilities plan that future boards and future engineers might be trapped into and can't get out of. And the last thing I'll say in my little time at the podium here is that on number 6E on the agenda, Griffin street lights, I oppose the district spending unnecessary capital on 9 new lights. These are county roads, and we have no business lighting up county roads. The county can light up their own roads, and even if they don't match our lights, I don't care. I think that's a chance for us to save some capital. We've spent 160 grand on sidewalks at Griffin, 60 grand on oak trees. Those were all bailouts that the developer should have put in, and I think enough's enough. And finally, Bill Pricey, I'm glad to see Bill's here. I would urge you to consider including in his mission a digital rendering of Gateway Commons Park into some kind of a nature trail. He's capable of doing that. He does a great job with digital renderings for all the community to see. So include Gateway Commons Park. You might get it done for a very small amount. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob.
Next on the agenda is Mr. Charles Mann, representing WCI.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Charles Mann with the Vies Law Firm. I'm here on agenda items, administrative agenda items A and B, which are submitting various infrastructure for turnover. I don't know if you'd like for me to go now, or it might be more appropriate when those items come up. I can go either way, if the chairperson or management would.
When the items come up?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, and we had one more, and this was from a resident that I spoke to, and he asked me if he was not able to attend. He's going to try to attend the June 8th hearing, but he just asked me to read 2 portions of a letter that he submitted, and should just very quickly. He said he's deeply opposed to any CDD assessment, more specifically the scheduled amount homeowners are going to pay, 50.70%, while commercial businesses are paying marginal amounts. And this very kind of budgeting that threatens our family's financial security and has now completely broken our trust in the Gateway Services CDD. We're now left with thoughts of completely rethinking Gateway altogether. Gateway Services CDD has been sending out annual increases for the past 7 years, directly referencing the increases for lake bed remediation. And I resent the messaging Gateway Services chooses to use following any such communication of its intent to impose an increase in what type of billing it chooses to impose, direct in your taxes, and in bold print. Failure to pay any assessments will cause a tax certificate or will result in a foreclosure action filed against your property. It is this very type of demand that would put most of us into a foreclosure tax lien situation, as one would have to believe the average family unit, including ours, does not have that type of money on hand. There's an old saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
The name of that person is what?
That is Ben Goldberg.
Thank you.
And that is all the public comments we have.
Okay. I'm going to need to leave the meeting after we get through a couple of these items that are on the agenda. So there are a couple of them that I want to pull to the front of the meeting, as it probably requires the full board to discuss them. And Tony, the first one is the Girl Scout building.
Okay. And I apologize if not all board members received the email, excuse me, that was sent out on the 16th with the memorandum, or maybe early on the 17th, with the memorandum that was in front of you today. Briefly, based upon the direction at the last board meeting, we put together some bullet points and sent them to the attorney to Sean Ellis, the attorney for the seller for the Girl Scouts. And that's the third page in what you have in front of you. It's called Bullet Points for Consideration of Amending the Sales Contract. And that was sent on Monday, May 8th, and it was a follow-up to a conversation I had with Mr. Ellis on Friday, May 5th, right after the board meeting. And those incorporated what we believe were outlined what we believe were the salient bullet points that the board wanted the contract amended to keep this transaction alive. And the Girl Scouts were not able to respond in time as we were bumping up against the deadlines for sending out a notice of termination, one relating to title, which would be May 12th, and one relating to the inspection period due diligence, which would have expired on May 14th, roll over to Monday, May 15th. And as a result, a termination notice was sent late in the afternoon on May 12th to the various representatives. There was a flurry of activity on the part of the Girl Scouts that same afternoon, and on the 12th I received an email from the attorney for the Girl Scouts indicating that the board CEO of the Girl Scouts had aggressively contacted the various members of the board, some who live out of state, and they were amenable to reducing the purchase price to $320. Initially, they were not amenable to that, and agreeable to most of the other terms we talked about, with maybe two major points. One is the additional time frame for, I'll call it the more intrusive, destructive testing for mold. They countered with 10 days as opposed to our 45, and they want to have the $6,000 credit for the mold remediation back in the form of a credit at closing if it turns out to be less than $6,000. In other words, they're agreeable to $320,000 for the purchase price if we do the mold and destructive intrusive testing and we find out the remediation efforts cost $3,000 and they get $3,000 more back, should be $323 at closing for the purchase price. And the question is a time frame for us to do that in. April and I briefly discussed it, and 45 days was what they objected to. We thought 10 days was too short. Are you comfortable with 21 days, April? 21 days for that to occur. And so if the board's inclined, and again, they were amenable to extending the other inspection periods for the zoning and the title, similar to what we wanted to achieve those. So the only major ones were the mold inspection period and the purchase price. So I guess we just need some direction from the board. We can enter into a new contract and leave out a lot of the inspections that have already been performed, the appraisal and everything else, and focus on these other remaining contingencies with a $320,000 purchase price, 21 days to do the additional mold inspection, and determination as to what the cost will be, and if it's less than $6,000 to remediate it, they get it back. And if it's more than 6,000, I guess it's on our nickel or dime, so to speak.
Have we talked to whoever we're considering going in and doing that detailed mold review to determine that they can do it within that 21 days?
Because what she's saying.
Yes.
So in essence, it's just two major items: the reduction from 45 days to 21 days, and the fact that they get back anything that's not expended up to $6,000.
Yes, sir.
All
basically.
the other points that we made, they've agreed to.
Yes, I mean, the language is a little bit different than what I'd suggest, but yes, I mean,
We can live with
they
it.
got a little lengthy on the language, but the concept is there.
An attorney getting lengthy.
You said
April
it's
White,
gonna be brief.
sorry, April White, your business manager, and just for clarification, I believe that the mold inspection can be done, the destructive mold inspection can be done within the 21-day period. The company that does the mold inspection does not do the repair, so they would not be able to give us an estimate on what the repair cost is going to be. So as far as getting a repair estimate, that wasn't necessarily anticipated in the 21 days.
What time frame do you think you might need for that, April?
They did have some companies that they could recommend as far as getting a repair estimate, but I'm not sure, that was not discussed. I only discussed what services the mold inspector company
Well,
Well, if it's a big
actually
ticket item,
does.
It could be a major issue.
Yeah, Mr. Ellis had indicated that his clients had called around and they felt that the 10 days was reasonable because they felt they could get a company out there in 3 days, do the 12 by 12 section cuttings, do the additional intrusive or destructive testing, and then come up with a report within 3 or 4 days after that. So they felt comfortable. I don't know who they spoke with, but
So what you're saying is half the time can be spent on the report, the other half on getting a cost estimate?
yeah.
Yeah, I think we just push for that. That's all there
21
is to
days
it.
is- Yeah, I think
That's-
it's
yeah.
within a reasonable threshold, and depending on what the findings are, if they're excessive and we cannot come back within the 21 days with an estimate of repair, that puts us in a good position. That would give us cause to withdraw.
We back out.
Yep. So I think we would just get some money as quickly as possible,
Yep.
and then depending on what the findings are, we would also push as quickly as possible to get a company in and do estimates. But I think 21 days, I would agree.
Get the initial report done as quick as possible.
Yeah, agree.
and the 21-day window would be for us to do the additional inspection and come up with an estimate, and if we're not capable of coming up with an estimate that's acceptable to us, then we can cancel on the 21st day. Is that the approach? Okay.
Mrs. Flaherty, did you
I do have a question.
comment?
Yes, it says on the First Amendment, the purchase price is $342,000, and you're saying it was 300.
This is what they sent to us, and then afterwards, when they said 320,
Okay.
Yeah,
We don't have that anywhere in writing?
in an email. But again, this First Amendment is not what I would suggest that you approve. I would draft something if the board's so inclined, a bit different than this. Because this has the 10 days
It allows-
versus the
yeah,
21 days.
That makes the change.
And, yeah, and if we don't agree, then it would be that we just do not go in a contract with Girl Scout Building, is this correct?
Correct, if we can't come, if they're not agreeable to these basic bullet point terms, then there will not be a new contract.
Okay, so if we vote no, that means we don't,
That means that I
do
call them
nothing.
up and say, we asked for the deposit back, please send the deposit back.
thank you.
Mr. Guy?
We have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy to get to this point. And I would like for us to go ahead, but I want to go ahead with our eyes wide open and make sure that we know precisely what we're getting and we're all happy with it. With that understanding, I would make a motion to proceed as you have just outlined, and hope that we end up with a contract in the building. But it has to be to our advantage.
Understood, yes, sir.
And if that's a formal motion, I'll second.
Any further comment? I'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No,
4 to 1.
Thank you. Hey, they started to talk.
The second item I'd like to bring forward is 6D, the Lake Bank Restoration approval for the golf course sides of Lake 116 and 126.
Chris Shoemaker, District Manager. Why we've been working on the lakes and just strictly the residential side of those lakes. We also received some bids from 2 contractors to look at improving the slope and also putting littoral plants on the golf course side of those ponds. And basically, those costs per linear foot range from $76 to $101, or $271,000 to $354,000 on those lakes, with some differing construction methods and costs. The golf course, of course, does pay assessment fees like any residential, but the advantage is the contractors are out working right now. One of them is that gave us a bid. We have another local contractor we use. And it's really, this item was presented to the board for their consideration, brief discussion, and direction if they would like to move forward with us to come back with a solid cost proposal on the littoral plantings on the golf course side and reestablishment of that pond bank.
I know that originally we did not include the golf course side into our repair process, and I have had individual residents that have contacted me and are questioning why we would spend this kind of money on the golf course side and not use it to repair areas behind residences, since we've got so much repair work to be done. And I guess that's my question too. I'd like to have that answered, since we didn't include it.
Let me go ahead.
Yeah,
Couple of things. First of all,
Sorry, what number agenda?
6D.
first item is that just a little bit of a correction. I don't think these were bids. They're more preliminary cost estimates that we went to both contractors to provide. Both contractors are doing it totally different. In fact, Metro is offered us 2 options, one to where they would have the barge and one where they wouldn't have the barge. And also, they included no cost for what we would call anything that had to do with the littoral placement, the bank protection placement, which is the cocoa matting, and lastly, replacing all the sod on the golf course in the LME that's going to be torn up to make this happen in the first place. Why? I'm hearing just the opposite, Margaret. Everybody in our community is asking, why would you go in and do one part of the lake and leave the other? Doesn't make any sense. We have an issue that we've got to get around, and Rod kind of alluded to it, and that is we've got to come up with a way to reduce the cost of this stuff. A little bit different point of view is that if you recall, about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I stood at that very podium and told y'all it was going to be 16 to 18 million then. Nobody was cared to listen or hear that number. I'd take that 16 to 18 million right now and run, because it's looking higher than that. But the issue is we have got to find a methodology to avoid going into these future ponds and continuing to use Armor Max and the hard surface. The cost is going to eat us alive. At 200 and some thousand lineal feet and $200 and some a foot, do the math, and you get to 40 million real quick. Well, we all know that the ponds have differing degrees of seriousness of erosion problems, and that's why we ranked them. But the issue is that we've heard over and over again, we had the pond standards and all of that, that we need to take and find another alternative to reduce the cost. So that's what I'm looking at this project on Lake 116 as a quasi-demo project for a project that would utilize non-hard surface, use littorals, which is what we've been aiming at to try to do, and issue a tentative award of contract to Extreme Divers in the not-to-exceed amount of $195,000, because I believe that is the statutory limit that we can go on a operational change.
If it's deemed to be maintenance, it's deemed to be
It's
construction,
maintenance.
go higher.
it's maintenance. And to go back with them and negotiate the final number, making sure that we have everything written down in the form of a contract, and proceed with bank or upon 1/16 first as a demo to show what this is gonna work out like. We do have a timing issue. The contractor is available to do it. This particular contractor is available to move in immediately and get it done before the waters rise. The other contractor cannot do it until July, and I can tell you right now, coming in there in July with all the rainy season going, you will just absolutely destroy that side of the lake. So it would be delayed if you're going to do that. But he doesn't even have in his bid the cost of littorals or the repairs or anything else that's extra cost that's going to take his price substantially higher. But the biggest one I'm worried about is the timing. Extreme is ready to go. If we give them a go-ahead tonight with a notice to proceed and had the ability to do it, they'd be in there tomorrow or the day after. So my thing is right now, motion to tentative award of contract to Extreme Divers in a not-to-exceed amount of $195,000, and immediately proceed with preparing a contract and specification detailing all of the items that would be inclusive in that $195,000.
But if you're thinking about a pilot project, why would you go with the more expensive of the two lakes? Wouldn't you pick 126? That's,
Because you have to go down, that's another thing that Rod brought up that was not discussed. The reason these projects cost so much on the 126 and 118 and 116 is unless you got a helicopter, you can't get to them except at one spot. And the only spot to get to 116 and 126 is via 116. You'd have to come in by the gazebo. So 116's first logically because it's where you would enter the pond. It's that, pretty much that simple.
So, Ed, help me understand.
And we're trying to avoid putting a barge back in that lake, which raised that price way up to $330,000.
So help me understand, if we're looking at an add-on.
This would not be an add-on. This would be a separate funded, because we cannot get
No, I
SRF
understand.
funding
Well,
for this.
Okay, separately funded, but it would be in addition to the plan, that we have.
Yeah.
So the business case for doing that at this time, I thought originally it was, it would provide cost-save opportunities, because we'd already have a vendor on-site that could just hopefully absorb, continue to do the work. So they're there, their men are there, materials there. It would be at a reduction in cost as opposed to waiting and doing it a year or 2 years from now. Help me better understand what is the gain?
We delayed this, and they're gone. It's that simple. They're out of 116. 116's done on the residential side.
But it's not the same vendor though, right?
Well, no, the vendor that had the equipment, i.e. the barges, Metro, which is one of these two bidders, he's gone. He's picked up the barges, and they're in 126 right now. So any gains of saving were gone the minute he finished that project and we hadn't made a decision to proceed. Now, you can see what the cost is by looking at his bid of what it costs to bring in the barges to redo the project. He goes from, I think, what, Chris, 280 to 320 or something like that?
But, yeah,
But doesn't that stay? I mean, I still don't understand the value.
The barge, well, what you're seeing is the cost of bringing the barge back is about 40 grand.
Right, if we use that particular vendor.
If we use that
So
vendor, right.
Who were you recommending?
I'm recommending the firm that did the cleanup of
Is that,
104 Extreme Divers.
Oh, Extreme, so-
Yeah, Extreme Divers.
So Extreme Divers, they're not gonna bring in a barge.
No, they're gonna do it from the shoreline via Gateway Greens Drive and the LME.
What will we lose if we sequence this repair at a later date? If we don't do it now, what's?
Well, it's just like any construction project, you run the risk of costs go up. That's the big one, costs go up. Our biggest thing is, guys, and that's what I've been trying to say for years, we have not looked at a plan that utilizes littoral plantings, which is our salvation for trying to cut the cost. We've not looked at one of those plans. This is an opportunity to do it without doing it on a residential property, which, as you recall, when we had the pond standards meetings, I don't know how many meetings started off with, I don't want those weeds in my backyard. And we, in fact, we even included it in our pond standard, that we will not put littorals in any residential property or commercial property's backyard shoreline unless the development order so states that you have to do that.
Madam Chairman, can
But
we
we-
see if we have a second?
But we
to
gotta
this
cut
motion?
the cost.
Mr. Tinkle made a motion. I haven't heard a second.
That's
Thank you.
correct. Do we have a motion to Ed's motion to not to exceed?
No, I didn't realize we were still, I didn't realize he submitted a formal motion. I thought we were still just.
You want to repeat your motion, Ed?
Yeah, my motion is to immediately award, a tentative award of contract to Extreme Divers in the not-to-exceed amount of $195,000 to do Pond 116, and in the immediate future, Chris and Tetra Tech get to Extreme Divers with a detailed breakdown of the contractual items to verify that that price is indeed $195,000 or less. And it would be inclusive of everything, cleanup, as-bills, littoral placement, the whole 9 yards.
Would that include coming back to the board with the contract, or?
As long as it's less than $195,000, I wouldn't see a reason to do that. It'd be ready to
Pardon, the
proceed.
authorization for the
Just the
chair to sign
authorization
the
for the chair to sign the
Contract.
notice to, the contract and the notice to proceed.
Do I hear a second? I'm gonna second this just for continued discussion because it's my prerogative. My concern is that if we've already lost the opportunity for cost savings on this, then I don't know that it is beneficial to us to go ahead and do it now. And I do feel the pressure of the people that are saying, you know, this money should be spent behind residents' houses.
Well,
And
keep
I
in mind, Margaret, we're at $232 on these 5 ponds that we've awarded to make that 4.4 million. We're at about $232 average per foot. We've got a bid right now here from this contractor for $79 a foot. I don't know what we would expect that we're gonna get anything done any less than that. And the risk we run, that if we kick the can down the road, we have high water and we can't get in there to do it, we've solved nothing other than to raise the price of the cost of the project. We need to know that this will work, this methodology will work, that we can do the rest of these ponds, because we got other ponds. We got 8 more ponds in phase 1 and another 13 and 19 to go.
You know,
And we've got to figure out a way that we can do it at a cost less than $230 a lineal foot.
and explain to me also on, if you have to go, if you enter, to get to Lake 126, you have to enter Lake 116.
Correct.
Why would you do 116 first? Because you risk damaging what you've just repaired.
Well, you're not going to damage the work. You're going to be going down the same LME. The only issue would be is that if you go in and patch it, because my next motion would be, once we do this and that work is done, we would go do pond 126 and follow it with 126. We have a price for both from both contractors. The total is about, what was it, right around $300,000. 310, somewhere in that ballpark. So yeah, to answer your question, I wouldn't. I'd go right on and do pond 126 next, upon the successful completion of 116. Keep in mind, we have the limitation of $195,000. If it weren't for the limitation 195 and we had the access to the SRF, the motion would be for both ponds right now, right off the bat.
So, I mean, and I don't have any concerns with validating that the work needs to be done. For me, it's more about the process to which we get it done. We have a plan, we're executing on that plan. My fear is if we start deviating from that plan, it'll just set precedent down the road for someone else to say, well, what about this side? What about this? What about that? And that's just gonna lead us down a path. Now, And at the same time, I don't disagree with Rod. I mean, I think we've all had heartburn around the cost of this project. And originally, when I came on, I just didn't understand why we didn't bring some backfill and just come up with some simple solutions. But again, I've been educated and done some research and realized that we do that, in a couple of years we got to do it all over again, and we got to do it all over again. So let's do it right the first time. But the price is getting pretty big. With that being said, I would, and I know this is not what's going to be favorable for you or people in that area, but I would almost take a step back. Let's get done on the original plan, pause, reassess the plan, look at, the next batch of lakes. Is there another test that we can do on one of the planned lakes, or maybe we have to go back and revise the original plan altogether to see if there's additional cost saves or value engineering that these vendors are bringing. And it was a little disappointing we didn't have more bids, but at the time we needed to do something, right? I mean, we couldn't continue to delay. So I think the work needs to be done. I just can't move forward doing it now because it deviates from our plan.
Well, keep in mind, on those other projects, you want to take and go in and do this, the problem you're going to run into is you're going to put littorals back on people's yards that we've told them we're not going to do. We'll have a line in here that goes all the way out to the soccer field.
Well, but I think at that time, maybe you extend the plan a little bit outside of resident side to do some testing, but have that part of the standard plan, but expand it
This is the
slightly.
whole idea of this is, one, it's an environmentally correct way to go. It will show people what a correctly done littoral installation project looks like. And the biggest thing, and the biggest point of sales to them, is $232 is now $79 a foot. That's the whole
And I
idea.
understand where you're coming from, and it would be nice maybe to have a completed project from end to end.
And this is the only way I know to do it. And like I say, the lakes are the ponds are the ponds, and there's no differentiation as far as Southwest Florida or South Florida Water Management District is concerned. Erosion is erosion, whether it's on the golf course side, on the FPL side, on the church side.
Understood. Let's
Wherever.
hear from Mr. Guy and Mrs. Flaherty.
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
No, you can go
Thank you,
first.
Madam Chairman. Members of the board, I want you, first of all, to remember that on the first batch of lakes that we contracted a few months ago, the original estimate was in the neighborhood of $3 million, and the contracts, one of which had only one bidder, as Mr. Senior so correctly reminded us, with the associated costs came in around 4.6 to 4.7 million. We are way over budget right now, and spending $300,000 to validate a littoral issue, my opinion, is absolutely ridiculous. We've got to find ways to make headway, but do it judiciously and not totally ignore that it is our residents in the final analysis who are paying for this. I am intending to vote no on this resolution.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is, it says the staff has to go about and find a way to fund it. We don't have a way to fund it. Why are we going to?
We do have, that was announced at the last meeting.
Okay.
Stephen
And my
said
other
we have the
thing
money.
is coconut matting. I've been told that coconut matting, if you put rocks above it in about a year, the rocks come through it. And so I'm concerned with that.
That's why we're not putting rocks, we're putting in littorals.
Yeah, but I'm
They're
just
trying to do that at
concerned
Hampton
about
Park, and it's
the
not gonna work.
Coconut matting, because it's at noon too.
I would be more inclined, if you're wanting to do a pilot project to see how the coconut matting and the littorals are gonna work, to go with the Lake 126, that's the less expensive of the two. Especially since you're saying that you have to go through 116 to get to 126. It just doesn't make sense to me to do 116 first. It's the more expensive lake, and it seems like it's more remote from 116. So if you were willing to change that, I would vote for it, but
What's the
it gives
cost
me a
on it?
little heartburn.
What's the
What your
cost on
problem is,
116?
Margaret, you're going to tear up all of the bank along 116 to get to 126.
Well, you
So
do
you-
that anyway, right?
Yeah, but you're already doing the project. In other words, you're going 2,600 feet down 116 in the LME, tearing it up to be able to put the first load of stone on 126.
Well, that would be true if we repaired
But you're doing
116
16.
first.
But if you come back and then you drop it, you're gonna repair it, then come back and tear up 116 again. So there's no savings. It makes no sense. You're gonna tear it up to get to 126, okay?
Okay.
Part of that is to repair it after you get done, correct? Then you're gonna come back and tear it up again to do 116. That's why I brought up, you do 116 first. That's the best engineering way to do it. It's not repetitive repair.
But it would be, right? Because if we repair 116 and we like the way that it looks, and then we decide we're gonna do 126 now, you're telling me you have to tear up 116 and we just repaired to
Now, if
get
you
to
wanna do,
126.
that, I'll go along with that. I would go along and revise the motion to do 126 first, providing that we immediately do 126 afterwards. I don't have any problem with that. I don't know what that accomplishes, but the key is that you're subject to the limitation of the $195,000. That's what causes half the problem.
How much time would you need to validate that, that particular process in order to know that, I mean, you would have to wait at least 2 years, right?
To do
In order
what
know
now?
that If you did the repairs with the coconut matting and littorals, you would have to have a set amount of time in order to see if that particular process.
I think once you put those in, you're going to, I talked to Mark Black, who's a noted golf course guy in this area, and Quail West, real fancy club, just did this very thing, and it's the end product was beautiful, just absolutely beautiful.
But how long
And
ago
the
was-
issue.
How long ago was it? that they did
A
that?
year ago.
So they haven't had
So-
any additional
No,
erosion
no.
on top of what they would have seen?
No. And the issue is that we're going to have to do it. I don't know why we're holding off on, everybody's asking me, why would you have not done it in the first place? And I said,
thought we
I
did
can't answer
coconut
that.
matting at one of the previous lakes.
No, we haven't done it yet.
We've never used coconut matting and littorals as
No.
a solution?
No.
So hypothetically, are you saying if we run this test, could coconut matting and littorals be a potential alternative solution to Armor Max down the
I'm
road?
praying it's the solution. It's the only way we're gonna keep this cost on these projects down. We cannot do Armamax and $230 a lineal foot on every lake and gateway. We can't do it.
Well, I don't think that was ever how we had planned it. 'Cause
That's right.
as we get to the other lakes that don't
don't
have
require
as
as
much
Well,
damage.
one of the things that's got me concerned, and the reason I'm really vocal on this, is I see what's going on in Hampton Park. We got a mess over there. We got a mess over there. If you don't put in the littorals and you don't build it right, you're not gonna maintain those slopes if you're even building them at 4-to-1 or 6-to-1. The first time water comes, or you get the drainage between lots, it washes away and it erodes it. And it is a mess to fix. And I'm trying to figure out a way to do it without doing and continuing to do hard surface. Hard surface just gets a lot of expense, and the big one is the county doesn't like to see the hard surface, but they really don't have a solution to get around it if you can't get the littorals to grow fast enough to hold the bank, i.e. the reason for the coconut matting, the cocoa matting.
Okay, so we got a motion, and I did second, so I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm gonna say aye. All those opposed?
No.
No.
No. Motion fails. All right.
Sure.
Tony, I'd like to bring the last one that I'll have brought forward before I depart, is your memorandum on the fishing.
Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to review the memorandum, and I think behind it, there was, I'm not sure if some of the genesis for this reasoning, I'm not sure, all the emails were not attached, I don't believe, but there was some inquiries by some concerned residents with regards to fishing activities and people trespassing on, I think, a couple people, right? At least one person.
Yes. That's
Trespassing on their property to get to district lakes and then traversing around the lake below the control elevation, actually, because of the water levels being so low in the pond. If I misstate any facts, please correct me.
Basically in the brown area of the dirt, once the water, because the water has been so low.
And they were fishing there, and so the question was, what ability does the district have to, if the district wishes to allow recreational fishing in the district's ponds or lakes, what ability does the district have to ensure, first, that's a threshold question, does the district want to allow that to occur, the recreational fishing in district ponds or lakes? Secondly, if that is to be a policy of the district, what regulations or policy would the district have to try to ensure that people don't trespass over other person's private property to get there? And that's what this memo addresses, what rights we have as either the owner or the holder of an easement. And some people may take the position that they can walk across a district drainage easement, utility easement, lake access easement, lake maintenance easement to get to a district lake. That is not an easement in favor of the general public. It's an easement in favor of the district to perform its functions on the lake. The underlying property owner that has the easement encumbering it, that's still his underlying property owner. The district does not trespass, but somebody else using that to get to the lake is trespassing over that person's property. So I guess the threshold discussion was whether or not the board wishes to continue to allow, I guess, fishing in district ponds or lakes. And secondly, how to try to educate people that if they are going to do that, to not walk on anybody else's property. We gave examples of what other districts have done. Pelican Marsh is relatively informal, you saw that in there. And the key focus there is that no private, that the fishing policy of the Pelican Marsh District does not provide any authorization for anyone to access the Pelican Marsh lakes or ponds over private property. And that's clear, in that the individual property owner has the obligation to contact law enforcement if they're trespassing. And that's comparable to what the villages have also, that you don't use someone else's private property to access the ponds or lakes. And so, so I guess the threshold question is, does the board wish to maintain a policy of allowing recreational fishing? If so, we need to educate the public, and if not, we need to then talk about enforcement mechanisms.
Being one of the oldest property owners in this community, when I bought, it was stipulated to me by Westinghouse Gateway Communities that I could fish in any of the ponds in Gateway with the understanding of three things. One, it was done on common and/or Gateway Service District area to do it. Not, like Tony said, using easements to access a pond. Second, nothing on the golf course. You don't do any fishing on the golf course. The fear being wire getting tied up in the motors. And then the last one was, you don't fish on anybody's property except your own unless you have the permission to do that. And I see absolutely nothing wrong with continuing that process. There is one issue, though. Who's going to enforce it? I told in Gateway Greens, when I was the president of that deal over there for 6 years, we did this exact same thing. If somebody is fishing on your property and you didn't invite them, call the sheriff. It's that simple, call the sheriff. If you don't want to call the sheriff, don't call access control. They don't have that authority. They just don't have it. But the problem we've got is that you can go into some of the gated communities and you know what it is, they have a walk-in. You walk in with a fishing pole over your shoulder with your bait bag and you go right in. Nobody's stopping it. Now, if they're fishing on common areas, I suppose that's whatever that individual HOA would have as a rule. But in our ponds, this would basically permit that. But I wouldn't go any further than this. I'd say these are our standards. You fish on common property, you fish on private property, which is yours, and one other. You must be a resident of Gateway. If you're a property owner in Gateway, don't come across from Lehigh in here fishing.
Madam Chairman, may I ask Mr. Tinkle a question, since he
Certainly.
is the oldest resident in...
I didn't say, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, almost, that too.
I think he did say it.
Better watch that.
In your experience, has there been a lot of fishing going on in Gateway Greens or around the golf course or in any other
Not on the-
neighborhoods that you're aware of?
Not on the golf course, Bill, but we do have a
Scratch
problem.
golf course,
We-
in Gateway Greens?
We've had people that walk in the Walden Lakes gate, which is unmanned, but it's just got a drawbar. And it's got a what do you call it, pedestrian walkway. They walk right in, and the nice thing is right there is a common area that they can fish. We don't check to see if they're residents. We don't go check and see what property they own. But if they're fishing in the common area, we let it go.
Do
But
you-
what they do is then they meander down the lake and start crossing properties, and that's what have residents upset.
Do you check and see if they have a fishing license?
No. We have never touched that issue. They're private lakes, so I don't know that fishing license is applicable.
I don't know if we have any authority to enforce it, that's just.
Yeah.
That's always our problem, we don't have any enforcement. So
That is-
We've gone through that
No enforcement and no
issue
teeth.
for,
They've made it difficult, we put it that way.
But to me, that is a common sense way to address this issue.
I know in Stony Brook, those are basically the rules we have. You're allowed to fish on any of the lakes from the common area, but you're not allowed to trespass behind people's houses.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you want to fish behind your own house. And if you do it, you better have permission from the homeowner.
Correct.
equal standing of the city.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarification on the genesis of the issue, and I was kind of hoping, I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe this is Silver Lakes that was bringing this issue to me. Part of the problem and what we were trying to get clarification from is, and I have not reached out to the Sheriff's Department yet because I wanted us to go through our legal process and to the board. Part of the genesis of the issue is that the residents were actually told by the Sheriff's Department, and this is what they're telling me, they were told by the Sheriff's Department that as long as they're walking on that brown bank around the pond, they're on the district property and it would be up to us to do something about it. So I think we need to just bridge the gap of where we're at with the understanding with the Sheriff's Department that if they are to enforce that as a trespass issue, perhaps it's just something internally that we can deal with the Lee County Sheriff's Office. But that was the problem, and I don't know if we need to do a policy restatement, or I don't know if that's necessary in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
I think the Sheriff's Department might have a misunderstanding that is.
It's our property.
It's public property, it's not. Like Tony said. it's
That's what I was
camping.
thinking as well.
The lake maintenance easement isn't used for public access.
So I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. We need
Madam
to-
Chairman, may I make one short
Certainly.
comment?
Absolutely.
In as much as we have no enforcement authority, and in as much as we don't seem to have a huge problem, I'm wondering if we are not making a mountain out of a molehill, and that we ought to just tell your one person that they can fish as long as they're not on private property and go on to more important issues.
Well, he's the one that was complaining that the people were trespassing across the area behind his house. So for him, this is a trespassing issue. I think we just need to work with the Sheriff's Department that if somebody calls, that it is indeed not public.
Then they're
That's
gonna
not
ask you what your policy is, so I think we do need it, Bill. I agree with you, I'd like to avoid it, but I think we need the policy to be able, for that instance where somebody is on somebody's private property, they call the sheriff, and the sheriff says, I'm instituting the policy right here, you out of here.
Well, you know, the sheriff has other things to do besides.
They won't even come out.
Huh?
They won't even come out.
Yeah, they
I
will.
think, okay, two against one, we don't think, they'll bother with it, but if you want to direct Tony and/or April to work on a policy, I'm not going to oppose that, but I think that we've got more important fish to
do.
fry, if you'll let me use that expression.
10-foot pole, fish to fry, you guys are just.
Mrs. Flaherty.
He already hit me.
Wouldn't a sign do just as well, fishing by gateway residents only on common property and the signs stuck there on the common property. And that way you are eliminating,
Take 200 signs.
it was just a thought.
I mean, there's been from time to time an issue in Stony Brook, and we've got a sign that says no trespassing,
Mhm.
and we move that to wherever the area is that, there hasn't been anything recently, but
No.
there have been times when there is, and we just put no trespassing signs up. And that seems to curtail the problem.
Just a thought.
But if it's to have a policy on the record that the sheriff's department can pull out of his pocket if he need be, is not a bad idea.
Well, then, why don't you direct us to April and the attorney to work out a policy for us?
Or at least reach out to the sheriff's department.
Like Tony said, and just handed, this was included in our handout, this one that's from Pelican Marsh, with a few tweaks, it's our policy. Could easily be done.
See, it already exists.
Not gonna take any time to do it,
Yeah,
Bill.
that
Yeah.
sounds like the reasonable thing to do, just so that we can say we do have a policy if somebody
Okay,
asks.
why don't you authorize them to make the tweaks and get it back to us?
Okay?
Okay, April, I'll do that. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And at this point, I'd like to take a 5-minute break. That should give Mr. Banks time to get back, and I need to depart, so we'll take a 5-minute break. And then you're in charge, Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you.